welcome to a new episode of Treasures. Today we're coming to you from a unique place, so stay with us. Today we're coming to you from the Egyptian Museum of Antiquities, and we will be continuing our tour of the Middle Kingdom galleries of the museum. Earlier we have discussed how the ancient Egyptian history was divided into kingdoms, and that it consisted of 30 ruling families, 30 dynasties, and that these 30 dynasties were divided into kingdoms according to the periods of glory or decline, and that the kingdoms were the periods of glory. So we had old, middle, new, and late kingdom. The Middle Kingdom actually was preceded by almost 200 years of chaos and decentralization of the government, which was called the Intermediate Period. Then in 2030 BC, a king from Luxor called Mentuhotep Nebhi came to the throne of Egypt, and he managed to unite the north and the south once more, forming the 11th dynasty, the Middle Kingdom, and we're right now in the gallery of it. A characteristic feature of that era was the beautiful monumental buildings of it, as well as the development and the exquisite literary works. Also, that family, they did a lot of reclamation of the desert projects and also reclamation of the land in the oasis of Fayoum. Joining me today is Professor of Egyptology as well as lecturer Dr. Mohammed Nabil, who will talk to us more about the artifacts of the Middle Kingdom at the Egyptian Museum of Antiquities. Right now standing in front of the showcase of the funerary stelae of the Middle Kingdom. Dr. Mohammed, would you tell us a bit more about funerary stelae in ancient Egypt?
The funerary stelae were very important. Again, this is they were one of the tools to help the spirit of the deceased to identify the facial features, and also they were inscribed with the offerings and everything that he might need in the afterlife. With representations and inscriptions, and then when the spirit or when the soul of the deceased reads everything becomes real. And this is to overcome the problem that I told you before, that at the very beginning they used to put real food and drink. The ancient Egyptians were very skillful to represent the different types of food and drinks. For example, we have here a beautiful stela from the Middle Kingdom, and it shows the whole family, and this shows the family ties in the ancient Egyptian civilization. Before, we have seen different figures, individual figures, but here for the first time you can see the whole family together. You can see the father, you can see the mother, and in between you can see their son, and on the other side from the stela you can see the wife, right? And in between you can see the offering table heaped with different kinds of offerings to be offered for them in the afterlife. That's why you will always find hieroglyphic inscriptions with the text telling us the different types of food and drinks. Like we have beer, we have bread, we have geese, we have so many kinds of offerings. And if you look at the colors are very bright, and they are very beautiful, as you can see.
Yeah, actually the colors, these were natural colors, like from the ochres and the various type of stones crushed and mixed with plankton and so on.
Yes, actually the colors in the ancient Egyptian civilization came from minerals. Like they used the red color from granite, the black color from basalt stone, green color from green granite, the blue color from, yes, so from different minerals. The ancient Egyptians used to smash these minerals and they produced colors. Then they covered their scenes with wax and different oils in order to make the scene very bright. But of course, some of these pieces are restored, but of course the majority are original. But of course we have the restoration department and they do some restoration works.
Now, I've noticed that actually men and women, there is quite a distinct difference in the colors between the male and the females. Is that real? Like, were we really different in color as here?
Actually, yes. This is especially in art because for the ancient Egyptians, men used to go outdoors, so that's why they are tanned, so they are exposed to the sun, because they were like either workers or warriors and noblemen, so they used to check everything outside. But women, they were pampered, so that's why they were indoors. That's why you can see the cream white skin or the cream white color, which is really beautiful, and it is very interesting to differentiate the colors in the ancient Egyptian art. And moreover, you can see that all the figures of the ancient Egyptians were represented with a profile, so that's why you can see the profile, except a full eye to show us the identity of this person, and a full chest and full two arms to show the power of this man. Even for women, as you can see, they are represented with the profile, with the full eye and the chest.
Now let's move to the next piece.
Thank you. Let's go.
Dr. Muhammad, I'd like to ask you about the postures of the statues. Like here we see the king in the Osiris form, as we have seen in another episode with the statue of Montuhotep Nebhebetra, which is the shape of the god or the image of the god Osiris. But are there other type of postures and other type of garments that a king can be represented in wearing or in?
Yes, of course, it depends on the purpose. For example, as you said, that if he is represented in the Osiris form, this is something related to death. That's why you can see that he's wearing a garment and his two arms are crossed, and sometimes he's holding the flail and the crook, the royal insignia. Sometimes he is represented standing wearing a kilt, for example, and he's standing with the left leg forward, so it shows the military march. Sometimes if he is wearing a starched kilt, for example, so he is in a praying attitude. So that's why the different positions of the kings shows the purpose of this statue. And the kilts.
All right, I think that this is the Hebset garment because it's short, isn't it?
So this is the Hebset garment, and actually the Hebset was a festival, and it was a religious festival that the king used to celebrate every 30 years. And after 30 years of his reign, he has to go in a fight with an ox or a bull, and he has to kill this ox, and after that he claims that he is the king for 30 years. Later on, kings started to celebrate this Set festival after 4 or 5 years. So we have kings like Ramesses II celebrated this Set festival for 14 times. So, but this doesn't mean that he lived for 200 years, right? So, but he wanted to remind his people that he is strong enough to rule them. That's why, for example, if you look at this statue, you can see that he is wearing the garment, and you can see that he is represented with an oxen tail, sign of power, strength, and fertility.
What about the base of the statue? What type of designs are on it? Like I noticed bows. What are these bows for?
This is very impressive because those bows are showing the 9 bows, and the 9 bows are representing the 9 enemies of Egypt, and they are represented under the feet of the king, sign of submission, as if he has full control on his enemies. So they were representing different tribes. 3 tribes in Libya, 3 tribes in Nubia, and 3 tribes in Asia. So all of them are representing the 9 enemies, and all of them are shown under the feet of the king. However, many scholars are showing us or are telling us that number 9 refers to all enemies, not specifically 9 enemies, but it shows that all the enemies are under the feet of the king.
A type of like multitude, the double of 3?
Yes, exactly. Because 9 for the ancient Egyptians exactly was the biggest number, the biggest, yeah. So that's why it shows either or. Either they were 9 enemies, or it shows all the enemies, but it shows how powerful the king is.
An important artifact in the tombs of the noblemen is what we call a false door. And now I'll be asking Dr. Muhammad about the role of the false door in ancient Egypt.
So, as we agreed before, that the spirit of the deceased or the ka of the deceased comes every day to recognize the facial features. So, how the spirit of the deceased goes into and out from the tomb. That's why the ancient Egyptians made the false door for the spirit of the deceased. That's why we call it the false door, because it looks like a door, but it's made out of stones, and it helps the spirit of the deceased to go inside the tomb to recognize the facial features, and it goes out. And you can see the 2 eyes of horse are represented there to allow the deceased and to allow the spirit to see what's happening inside the tomb and outside the tomb. The false doors were always located on the west, because west refers to death for the ancient Egyptians. So once you go inside the tomb, any tomb, and once you see a false door inside, blindly you say that this is the western part of the tomb. East refers to life, because the sun rises from the east, sets on the west.
Is it true that also they were also always located in the area of the burial chamber and where the body is buried?
It depends. It depends on the size of the tomb. If the tomb is very small, so they put the false door on the west, and also they put the burial, or they put the sarcophagus or the coffin. But if the tomb is huge or it is very big, so they can have the false door with an offering table, and they can put the burial in a next room. And also sometimes tombs or the tombs served many kings or many officials, because we can have 3 or 4 false doors inside a one tomb, because in this tomb 4 people were buried inside. And the false doors were made out of different materials. They were made out of limestone, sandstone, or wood, like in the Old Kingdom, the false door of Ika.
Well, thank you very much for being with us in this hall, and now we will be moving to the next hall to continue talking about the Middle Kingdom.
Thank you very much. Let's go.
Of the Middle Kingdom Gallery, and behind me we have statues of King Senusret III, or Sesostris as he is called in Greek. Dr. Muhammad, would you talk to us about these statues of King Senusret?
Senwesret. Actually here we have the beautiful statues, 10 identical statues for Senwesret III. and actually they were made for the funeral or the burial chamber of Senusret III, and he was one of the great kings of the 12th dynasty, Middle Kingdom period, and he was such a great person or a great king because he had so many campaigns and expeditions to different parts of Egypt actually. So he went to the south, he went to Nubia, he went to the east, to the borders of Libya, and also he had expeditions to Sinai to bring turquoise. If you look at this or these beautiful statues, all of them are made out of limestone, and you can see that the king here is represented wearing the royal headdress, which was called the nemes, and on the forehead you can see the representation of the cobra. And the cobra was the goddess of protection in the ancient Egyptian civilization because it has 24 hours opened eyes. If you look at the facial features of these statues, you can see that they are identical, and this shows again the skillful art of the ancient Egyptians. You can see that the ears are exposed, and you can see that here he has the straight beard. The muscles are very well represented, and you can see that he is holding something with his right hand, a scarf or something. It shows the power of the king, and also you can see that the other hand is extended, and it shows the mercy. So he has the power for his enemies and the mercy for his people. And here he is sitting on a different type of thrones. This is the low-backed throne, and on the two sides we have different representations showing us the unification between Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt together. Because any king of Egypt supposed to be the king of Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, right? Because Egypt for 3 intermediate periods was divided into Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. So it was very important for the king or for the pharaoh to claim and to say to his people that he is the king of the north and the south, and he is the king of both lands. That's why he is sitting on the throne, and on the two sides of the throne you can see the representation of the Sematawi, or the unification between the two lands.
Well, actually the Sematawi here is unique because usually it would be either tied with the lotus and papyrus around the esophagus and the heart, or the god Hapi, the god of the river Nile, binding it. But actually here it's different because here we have Seth and Horus, and that's rare.
This is very impressive because in the methodology of the ancient Egyptians, Horus and Seth used to have a big fight together. They were completely against each other. But here you can see also the unification. It's not only for Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt together, but this is the unification between Horus and Seth. And this shows the peace at the time. It shows that during the time of Senusret III, during the time of the Middle Kingdom, there was peace all over the country, and they had no fights. Because actually, before the Middle Kingdom, there was something very important happened in Egypt, that Egypt had civil wars during the first intermediate period. Then Mentuhotep Nebuchadnezzar came, and it took him like 40 or 45 years to solve all these problems and to unify the country and to make it strong. But here in the 12th dynasty after Mentuhotep Nebuchadnezzar, here we can see that everything is peaceful. So you can see the unification between Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, and between the good god and the bad god, or the evil god.
Dr. Muhammad, actually here the burial chamber of the king is actually quite exquisite, and it still retains its colors. So would you please tell us a bit about it?
So actually it is very impressive because it is very rich. It is very rich in terms of colors and actually in terms of representations inside, because if you see what do we have inside, we have the beautiful sarcophagus, and you can see that the word sarcophagus means the one who eats the flesh, because it was made to put the deceased inside to protect the deceased, because the main aim and the main goal for the ancient Egyptians is to protect the mummy of the deceased or the corpus, because the mummification started later on in the 17th dynasty. So before the 17th dynasty, actually we had no evidences of mummies, so they used to have the relics or the bones inside. But we have the sarcophagus to protect the deceased, and you can see that we have the coffin text is written over there, and we have the magical spells to protect the deceased, and the spirit of the deceased has to read all these magical spells to go to the Iaro. Iaro is heaven, because the ancient Egyptians believed in heaven and hell. So that's why if he has a good heart, he will go to the paradise. If his heart is full of sins, he will go to hell, actually, or he will not enjoy life in the Iaro or the green fields, which is the paradise for the ancient Egyptians. Then from the sarcophagus, if we look at the walls, you will see something very impressive, that you will see hieroglyphic inscriptions again having the offering formulas, and we have also representations of different types of offerings, and we have different types of jars and liquids for the deceased in the afterlife to secure his journey in the afterlife. And if you look inside, we have some parts are still unfinished or restored, and you can see that the walls are divided into squares inside, and this gives us the information telling us how the ancient Egyptians used to carve and to color their paintings inside the tombs, that they divided the walls into squares to have the same proportions everywhere inside the tomb or inside the burial chamber.
Dr. Muhammad, in ancient Egypt there were many types of statues, especially for the noblemen, because the noblemen, they could afford more room for, let's say, unconditional or untraditional postures. Now behind us we have what we call the cubic statue, or the recumbent one. Would you tell us a bit about that statue, type of statue, and was it present in the Old Kingdom or is it a Middle Kingdom innovation?
Actually, as you said, that we have different types of statues, and the statues were either standing or seated. And the statues, if they are standing, they are either static or showing us the movement. If the standing statue is showing us the left leg forward, so it shows the movement. If the two legs are together, so he is standing, and this is very static. Then you have the seated statues. Basically, you can see the king or the noble is sitting on a chair or on a throne. But here we have another type of statues. It is a standing statue, but we call it the block statue, because actually the freestanding statues, it is very easy to destroy them, right? They could be easily destroyed. But here we have the block statue, because you have a shorter statue with standing legs, so it gives us the impression of the standing statue.
But isn't he recumbent? Like, isn't he sitting?
But actually, it's supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be a standing statue, but it was made like this to protect the statue from being destroyed, right? While moving the statue from one place to another. But sometimes the ancient Egyptians showed this in their activities. For example, you can see the father is protecting his daughter, and you can see like Sinmud, for example, is protecting young Hatshepsut. But here you can see that he is represented recumbent, and you can see that with the standing legs, you can see it gives us the impression that he is, or he's supposed to be standing. But if he is represented seated, we have to go through the seated statue of the seated scribe. So this is how the ancient Egyptians represented their seated statues. But this statue is supposed to be standing, but it was made like that to protect the statue from being destroyed.
Today we have viewed together a variety of Middle Kingdom artifacts. We've looked into the statues and the burial chamber of King Senusret III. We've also talked about block statues and many other interesting items. And by this we come to an end of this episode of Treasures. Until we meet again with a new place and a new treasure, it's goodbye.